Got an LFG post in my inbox. Been a long time since I've seen one of these. From Red Redacted. Old School Essentials. Real Dungeons & Dragons. Thursday nights and Friday nights, 7 p.m. CST. DM has 50 years of experience running Dungeons & Dragons. Less rules means better games that don't become boring because the overpowered players are simply never challenged. If you think you've got the mettle for this type of challenge, send Red Redacted a private message for more details or questions. Makes sense I'd get this. I love running games more challenging for my players, and don't like it when things are too easy for them. At the same time, though, less rules for a more crunchy game is an interesting combination. Also, just saying, you might have better luck finding players if you come off as less of a dickhead. This happened some years ago, so my memory is fuzzy on the details, but I'm sure I can spin a tale from the broad strokes of what happened. I was new to tabletop role-playing games at the time, and we were playing Pathfinder at low levels. I don't recall the classes we chose. I also didn't know any of the other players at the table, so as a professional, awkward introvert, I blended into the background for most of the session. To keep things simple for the new game master and even newer players, we were dropped into a basic dungeon crawl, a cave infested with monsters. As we step into the darkness ahead, we hear the scuttling of numerous legs, and it doesn't take long before we're ambushed by giant spiders. We push on valiantly, clearing out half the dungeon. Here, we come across a narrow tunnel, and that's when the true horror appeared. Was it some creature from the darkest depths of the earth? Or was it some giant arachnid titan? No, it was a swarm of regular, tiny spiders. The swarm wasn't pursuing us or anything. They were simply there, minding their own eight-legged business while blocking our way. Now, the thing about Pathfinder is that swarms have certain defensive traits, and most importantly for the story, immunity to weapon damage. Slice and bash them all you like, they just reform. Can you guess how many of our characters relied mainly on weapon damage? Basically everyone. Presumably, the swarm was on the walls as well. I can't quite remember, so we couldn't climb around it, and if we wanted to jump over it, we'd need to do a skill check, and that would put us at risk of being attacked. Given that none of us appeared to have a way to deal with the swarm if we failed that check, no one was willing to risk it, and any alternate solution that got suggested just got denied by the GM. Since this tunnel was the only way to progress the dungeon, we appeared to be stuck. Finally, one player remembers they've got some alchemist fire in their inventory. We asked if we could drop it or roll it, anything that would guarantee a hit, but we had to throw it. And of course, the player rolled low. We watch as our only means of attack slipped from our grasp, then crashed and burned further down the tunnels along with all of our hopes. One of the more outspoken players had argued with the GM over some minor rulings already, but now it was starting to overtake the session. The rest of the evening was spent listening to them loudly argue, just hoping some solution would present itself so we could move on with the damn game. Ultimately, we agreed to end the session there, and have the party go back to town and get more firebombs to toss. But with the wind thoroughly knocked out of our sails, there was no second session after that. Moral of the story: as a player, keep an eye on what damage types you have, and work together with the group, rather than argue with the GM. And as a GM, please don't be overly strict about how an encounter needs to be solved. TLDR, new party goes into a dungeon and slays numerous monsters, only to be stopped by one swarm of regular spiders, which leads to debating rules rather than playing the game. I think the latter lesson for GMs is much more important than the lesson for players. I think it's really important for players to be knowledgeable about the resources they have, but I generally don't create encounters that are basically impossible for the players to beat without very specific ingredients or spells. Apparently, the party here gave the GM multiple different solutions that could have helped them to solve this problem. I assume one of those solutions was merely to find another way around. The GM could have provided numerous different ways to just get around the spiders. Maybe if they killed the spiders, they get some kind of special reward, and by going around, they forfeit that reward, perhaps? Your players don't need to win everything, but they should have some kind of way forward, because remember, games are supposed to be fun, and backtracking all the way back to town just to kill a bunch of little spiders, yeah, boring, waste of time, and most importantly, unnecessary. Alright, to start off, names. I'm me, new to D&D. I don't know if I'm going to keep playing based off this experience, but I was telling a friend about it, and he apparently got a kick out of it and told me to post it here. Joe is the main problem. My friend that plays the DM in his group. He's always been a bit anal about doing things right, and is otherwise a fun guy to hang out with. Dan is Joe's friend. We've hung out a few times, but I never really got to know him that well. A lifelong player and the group's expert. Sorta on my side, but also a tad grating, and seems to view himself as a peacemaker. The rest aren't super relevant. So I'm new to this whole D&D thing. It always seemed kind of silly and dorky when I was growing up. I have a few friends who were super into it. I joined a group with them, and they went to see the new D&D movie, and it was great. I really wanted to check it out and give the game another chance, so I asked if I could join their group to try it out. They are deliberate about group size, but eventually agreed to come let me check it out. Joe says to not worry about preparing anything, but to show up to their next game about an hour early so he can help me make a character, and can otherwise learn the rules by seeing them play. I agree, but in the days coming, I get a bit impatient, so I look up the rules and take a crack at making a character myself. I get a good handle on things, and soon have a human bard, level 4, since that's what they said the group was. Skip forward to game day and I text Joe that an hour early is a bit tight on my schedule, so I'll just arrive at the normal time. But I had my character ready, so it wouldn't be an issue. He asks what I made, and I say human bard, and he doesn't reply. I arrive on time for the start of the session, and Joe hands me a sheet, saying he spent the hour just throwing me together a character just in case I hadn't done mine right. I show him my bard, and he barely even glances at the paper before handing it back and saying I can't use it. Apparently, they're using like an older edition, and mine was for the new one. He points out that he made the backup also a human bard, and I can use it to learn the game until I convert mine. I have to admit, I'm a bit miffed. I was proud of my bard and wanted to use it. I asked if it wouldn't be just fine, and Joe says it doesn't work. We go back and forth for a couple of minutes, Joe insisting I use the spare sheet. Eventually, Dan pipes up and says it'll be fine to use my bard, and they can just adjust for any changes between the editions as they come up. And if Joe needs help adjusting anything on the fly, he'll help. We get to playing, and it's fine for a bit with minor tweaks to my sheet. I'm not going to complain if I'm told to increase my AC by 2, until I try to cast Banishment on a guard. Wait, that doesn't check out in any edition. Joe gets an annoyed look on his face and asks to see my sheet. He looks at my spells, then hands it back, saying I have to only use 2nd level or lower spells. Apparently 3.5, that's the edition they were using. And also, side note, what's up with the half edition? It doesn't have spell levels matched to character levels. Anyway, Dan suggests that since half of my spells are now missing, I should get some extra 2nd level spell castings. Joe agrees, and again, I'm a bit annoyed because now I'm half as strong as I planned. The rest of the game goes by without much friction, aside from me needing to change my bard's charisma save to a wisdom one, which was annoying since charisma is his best stat. After the game, Joe tells me I'll need to convert my sheet to a proper one for 3.5. Dan offers his help, but if I'm being honest, I don't feel like spending a bunch of time alone with him. I push back, pointing out that my sheet was already adjusted for 3.5 now, so there wouldn't be any issues. Joe looks put off, but doesn't argue. Fast forward to the next week, and I text Joe, asking if the game is at the same time. He replies that they had to hiatus this week. Next week is the same thing. And I get the message. I'm not stupid. I know when people are avoiding me. Anyway, yeah, that's my horror story. Sorry if it ended with a fizzle instead of a bang, but hope it gives you as much a laugh as my friend had. Your friend might have been laughing at you, pal. Look, I get it. You're brand new to the game. When you're brand new to the game, you make a lot of mistakes. I made plenty myself, but the good news is that when people offer to help, I listen to them. Look, maybe this DM, these players, maybe the vets are really, really unhelpful, but outside looking in perspective, they seem extremely helpful. The DM even creating a just-in-case character sheet, which ended up being completely justified, given that our writer made a 5th edition character sheet for 3.5. And yeah, that's not going to work. There's so many small things in the story that just make me think, yikes, I would rather not play with this person. Like, for example, the DM asking a brand new player to show up an hour early. Not entirely unreasonable. The player agrees, but then day of is like, oh, it's outside my schedule. I'm just gonna come on time. And then arrives with a completely busted character sheet with overpowered spells that was made for the wrong edition. I mean, I would be pretty frustrated too. Like I said at the top, everyone makes mistakes, especially in a game with textbooks, but that's why you have a dungeon master, fellow player characters, Google to help you out. But it's a two-way street. You need to accept that help. And this person doesn't seem to be doing that. This happened around 6 years ago when I was like 15. I and my friends made a D&D group one summer because it looked fun. The first group of friends included myself, John, Max, Harry, and Sam. Fake names, of course. We skimmed over the basic rules and bought a little beginner pack. It had some dice, some character sheets, and The Lost Mines of Phandelver Adventure. John was the dungeon master. I played an Aarakocra rogue, Harry played a human barbarian, Max played an elven sorcerer, and Sam played a dragonborn wizard. We had a blast. We barely followed the story and just had fun with little side things. This is why Lost Mines of Phandelver is the best starter campaign. Debatable. We finished that campaign and had a little break period so John could write up a campaign himself. In this period, Asshole joined, who will be known as A-Hole from now on because I don't want to get demonetized anyway. A-Hole was a weird kid. I don't want to be unnecessarily mean, but he was like really weird. He was always really unhygienic. He liked anime to like a creepy extent and still thought 2014 style memes were really funny. Imagine the kind of kid who would blast the Soviet anthem on the bus thinking himself a comedian. But he wasn't a total asshole, so I was fine with him joining. John's next campaign was about a world corrupted by an evil organization that our group of noble adventurers had to defend this world from. Pretty normal stuff. Everyone made more deep characters than last time. I made a homebrew subrace of lizard folk that were called gecko folk. Harry and Sam had a cool character relationship, and everyone played more complex characters in general. Except for A-Hole. Now, it's fine if it's his first time around, he doesn't make a cool character. Beyond that, though, A-Hole still had some problems. He barely knew the rules. We had given him a whole rule sheet to learn the rules. It wasn't complex stuff. It was things like AC and initiative. And we thought this would be a one-time thing. We were wrong. Throughout this entire time, he never fully learned the rules, all the way up to the final session where we had to explain things to him constantly. He would also constantly goof off. We usually played in Sam's basement because it was spacious, and he was usually available. Every time we would do any roleplay or anything just non-combat in general, A-Hole would be playing on his phone or his computer or goofing off and distracting everyone. Some examples of his On multiple occasions, he drew a World War II German symbol, if you know what I mean, and sometimes on character sheets. He would start watching anime, usually without headphones, and it wasn't just stuff like One Piece or Naruto. He watched the very weird predatory anime with like 3,000-year-old little girls and stuff. He would also never roleplay. There was only one time he ever consistently roleplayed, which we'll get to later. He would roll up brick wall characters and play them as brick walls. His version of roleplay was having a funny voice and doing the bare minimum. But the campaign was relatively fun. We had some cool moments and fun times. Then Max did a fun boss rush campaign that really wasn't important, but it was cool. I decided to DM next. We followed the rule that everyone should be the dungeon master at least once, so we planned that I would DM one, then Harry, then A-Hole. I wrote up a pirate adventure, mildly inspired by One Piece. This campaign is when A-Hole started to become more than just annoying. I was making this more roleplay heavy and asked each player to make more complex characters. Max made the captain character a fishman rogue, who was really cool. Sam made a human barbarian or fighter, I forgot. John made an Aarakocra monk, who was very well written. And Harry made a human ranger, who was also very cool. A-Hole made a human fighter, who was a brick wall. Everyone else had a cool, interesting reason for being a pirate, while A-Hole was just a criminal. In this campaign, A-Hole decided instead of roleplay, he would be a brick wall with a gun. There were many times when I hinted at a clear answer to a situation, and A-Hole would stab his way through it. For example, I put a minor villain's hideout inside a mayor's mansion that was heavily guarded. The party made a plan where John, Sam, and A-Hole would distract the guards by pretending to be a traveling circus, while Harry and Max would sneak in behind them and knock them out. John and Harry got passing performance roles. Then I turned to A-Hole A-hole, what do you do to trick the guards? A-hole calmly responded, I shoot one of them with my crossbow. Immediately, the entire table was confused and a little angry. He unfortunately hit. I mean, if he missed, what would have happened? My revenge is finally here. My foe stands before me. But if I kill him, I'll start a war. No, I must ignore those feelings. I must take action. Avenge my friend. It's time for you to die. Damn it, a natural one. My gun jammed. Fate has punished me.
Hey, how you doing? I shot you. I mean, yeah, but you missed. It's all good. But, I mean, everyone makes mistakes. Okay.
The combat started, and by the time we made it to the minor villain, the entire party was about half health. This made what was supposed to be a fun joke combat a slog that very much was not fun to DM. This continued throughout the entire campaign. The campaign ended when I placed a devil fruit for Sam after a major combat. In One Piece, a devil fruit is a fruit you eat that gives you powers but takes away your ability to swim. It was very clearly made for Sam, and in the middle of me describing its appearance, A-hole says, I shove it in my mouth and swallow it whole. After that, I gave up. We never finished the campaign, a recurring theme in this story. Afterwards, Harry started his campaign. It was a really cool underwater Atlantis game. I played one of my favorite characters I've ever written up. It was an elven paladin who read a Bible verse every time he cast a spell. I didn't do it every time. I also checked beforehand if it was okay with everyone, and everyone, including A-hole, said yes. Harry really liked the character, and we started up. Our ship sinks and we wake up in Atlantis. We were told to wait where we were for a decision to be made on our fate. We were clearly meant to escape to the very visible casino in the next area. There were strange markings around the room, and I cast Comprehend Languages. I know paladins can't cast Comprehend Languages, but I thought it would be useful, and Harry didn't really care. This is one of the only times I read a verse. A-hole, the atheist edgelord himself, decided to say, I want to cast silence around the paladin. Because Dungeon Master Harry had expressly told us that the guards would be back in 1 hour and silence only lasts for 10 minutes, this was clearly meant to stop me from casting my spell. I asked him why he did this, and he said, my character doesn't believe in gods, and thinks believing in them is stupid. He then proceeded to tell the guards that I tried to escape. We never even figured out how to escape in general. I was then tried and executed. The rest of the party tried to do something while A-hole was on his phone, only saying, I watched from the crowd. Yeah, that campaign only made it to session 2. Now you might be thinking, why didn't we just kick him if everyone was mad at him? We wanted to. There was only one problem. During my first game, after his repeated shenanigans, I brought up the possibility of him leaving the group. I tried to phrase it as, we want you to improve, but if you don't, we're going to not want to play with you anymore. He left me on red. About 3 days later, I got an email from his mom. It basically said that if I bullied her son anymore, she would have to report this to the school and get me expelled. She forwarded this to every member of the group. After this, we wanted to get him to leave, but couldn't. Every time a member of the group said anything to him about his shortcomings, they would get either an email from his mom, or in one case, she came up to Sam in person to threaten him with repercussions. Oh my god. After what A-hole did during Harry's campaign, we were all exhausted. It was A-hole's turn to DM, and we hoped it wasn't horrible, but instead he responded with, I don't have anything. This was 3 days before the next session. I decided to write up a city campaign. I asked everyone to write a character who was not only connected to the city, but also to the other players. Everyone did this, except A-hole. He first sent me another brick wall with no personality, and I quickly told him to redo it. A-hole thought long and hard, and decided to paint the brick wall. Harry made a human samurai who was friends with John's homebrew Stone Golem Warlock, and Sam played a drow ranger who was friends with Max's Aarakocra sorcerer. Our group really likes Aarakocra, by the way. A-hole came to the first session with a dwarven rogue who had an annoyingly shrill Scottish accent. He roleplayed as a crazy, insane little goblin who was married to a literal rock. John's backstory was about how he was turned to a golem by a cult of enchanters, which scared off his friend Harry. A-hole's backstory was that he was lazy, so he was kicked out of his dwarven guild. No connection to the city, no connection to the other player characters, and this was a dark, cult-based mystery campaign. I gave up DMing after our murder mystery ended with him killing a random innocent NPC. It makes me sad to this day because I made a whole map of the city, wrote up the first 5 sessions in 3 days, and Harry bought props for his character. After this, I just left the group. Instead of walking on eggshells, I bluntly told him that he was a horrible player. After that, the group fell apart. The strange thing is that nothing changed. None of us were friends with A-hole. He kind of just forced his way into the group and then ruined it. A year or 2 later, we got back together and had a blast. I'm also assuming his mom didn't fulfill her threat to get the principal of your school to immediately execute you and your entire friend group or whatever she said. Goes to show that when Karens talk big game, it's usually just talk. The clarification that all of this happened when the group were about 15 years old, basically in the middle of high school with all those wonderful high school problems going around makes sense. This is a very, well, it is a very high school story with all the usual high school trappings. We often talk about people not having the language to handle social confrontation, and that goes double when you're a kid. When you're 15 and you're still dealing with high school, you don't know how to handle a grown woman threatening to get you expelled from school over a Dungeons & Dragons game. A-hole's got some issues to say the least. Racism is bad, kids. Don't be racist. Kind of cringy. But I think the real villain is A-hole's mom. I mean, seriously, where do you think he learned it from? So, I have this play who was a regular. He would play anything you could imagine, from D&D 3.5 to Vampire the Masquerade, and he would always make it weird by trying to romance my NPCs. I do have some trauma about romance in TTRPGs, mostly because of being forced to participate in a few questionable moments, but that's beyond the point. I wasn't traumatized until now, and I had acted a few love scenes up until that point, but this was different. This guy was like really into it. Random mother of 3 whose husband had disappeared in the woods, he would flirt with her. Girl on subway was checking her phone while waiting on the train. Hey, nice weather. NPC add to the group to help lead them in a series of fairy subterranean tunnels. Oh, it's nice being with you. Female Nosferatu who used obfuscate to try and look less disgusting, but player knew how she actually looked like and had literally witnessed her cold-blooded murdering someone. Your name's Dahlia, right? Literally everyone and their cabbage seller. As long as it was a female NPC, they would get flirted on, advanced on, and proposed to. Most of the time, in a very roundabout way. Now, acting romance can be a great, solid performance. Usually, everyone is a tad shy or embarrassed about professing their feelings to an NPC controlled by their friends, DM or not, but this guy was way over the edge. I ended up calling quits when he tried to seduce a... Oh boy. She was about to be kidnapped by flesh-eating fairies, think changelings, but they eat the kidnapped children and infiltrate the family to cannibalize everyone. Kid is scared for her life because no grown-up, other than the PCs, believe her story. Something about glamour making people less prone to believing outlandish stories. And this guy, who was pushing 30s, suddenly wants to get grabby on her. He was trying to warm her during the cold of the night. And I'm like, nope! I'm out of here. He kept making plans because the girl tried to run away from home and was waiting on a bus stop, scared for her life, and this guy does a full predator on her. Maybe we can bring her back to our place, he tells the other players. I ended up cutting ties with the guy over this. I don't regret it, but damn, it still gives me this weird pit of the stomach feels. TLDR, player flirts with any female character that I come up with. I cut ties with the player after he tries to do weird things with a 13-year-old character in one session. Well, that was horrible, and thank God that this DM had the common sense to just go, no, I'm out. There's no way this ends in any way that isn't bad. I'm not gonna jump into what is true dimension and try to deduce what this guy was specifically after. Maybe he had a crush on the OP, maybe he just was a really creepy guy in general, but it really doesn't matter. The reason is irrelevant. When you act like this, no one cares about the backstory. All they care about is the consequence. The consequence being that everyone is uncomfortable and no one wants to hang out with you. So yeah, don't be like this guy, especially since this kind of behavior in real life is illegal. Fun fact. And that's it for today's episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series, where we cover some D&D advice for your viewing pleasure. New episode coming out this Sunday. It's linked in the cards. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down in the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment. Called his mom to let me know you made it to the end of the video. Hey, by the way, want to send your own horror stories? There's an email linked in the description. But even if you don't have any horror stories, in essence, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you all next time. Farewell.